Welcome to the Narako Deep Dive, the show where we break down the latest research and science around learning, memory, and on some days, anything else that catches our eyes. So let's jump right in. Today's topic. I hope you enjoy. You can see the wallpaper, the exact pattern, the exact color, from a bedroom you haven't slept in for 20 years. But ask what you had for lunch on Tuesday and nothing. Gone. And here's the part that should freak you out a little. That's not your brain losing data.
It's not?
No. It's deleting it on purpose. And the thing doing the deleting is...
cells that are being born in your head right now.
This is Narako. I'm Ray, that's Ellen. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly why your brain deletes memories on purpose.
And why that's a good thing.
Try this. Close your eyes and think about your childhood bedroom. Not the general idea of it, the actual wallpaper, the pattern, maybe a stain on the ceiling you used to stare at. You've got that, right? Crystal clear, decades later, unprompted.
Instantly.
Now tell me what you had for lunch last Tuesday.
Nothing. Genuinely nothing.
Right? And I'm not talking about like a vague general vibe of a sandwich. I mean it's gone. Full deletion. Which is deeply unfair, because my brain apparently has unlimited storage for the smell of my first grade classroom's radiator, but zero interest in preserving anything I actually need, like where I put my keys 20 minutes ago.
Cool that it does that without asking you.
Exactly my point. So the normal assumption, the one I had, honestly, before I started digging into this, is that forgetting is just passive, like a photograph left in the sun, slowly bleaching out until there's nothing left. A leak. Entropy. The system just runs down. But what if that's completely wrong? What if some of what you lose isn't leaking out at all? It's being taken out. On purpose. By something being actively built in your head. Okay, so if it's not leaking out passively, where does a memory actually start? Like, physically, in the head.
So here's the thing. There's a framework for this that's been around for decades called standard consolidation theory. And it starts with a pretty simple claim. When something new happens to you, it doesn't go straight into permanent storage. It gets grabbed first by the hippocampus, that little seahorse-shaped structure tucked in your temporal lobe. And the hippocampus is, structurally, a very fast learner. It can bind a new experience together almost instantly, but it's also a fast forgetter. It's built for speed, not permanence.
Right, so it's like short-term scratch paper.
Kind of, yes. And the neocortex, the big wrinkly outer layer, where your long-term knowledge actually lives, is the opposite, painfully slow learner. But once something's in there, it can sit for decades. So the theory says there's this training process, systems consolidation, where the hippocampus basically replays the new memory over and over. And that repeated replay slowly, incrementally trains the neocortex to hold its own version. And within the hippocampus itself, there's actually a whole relay. You've got the dentate gyrus feeding into the CA regions, which then...
Okay, hold on. You're doing the thing.
I'm doing the thing.
The layers within layers thing. Zoom back out.
Fair. Zooming out. The point is just, hippocampus fast-tracks it, then slowly hands it off. And we're not guessing about this part. There's real clinical evidence. Researchers looking at patients with hippocampal damage found something called a temporal gradient. Their most recent memories were wiped out, but memories from decades earlier were largely intact. That gradient is exactly what you'd expect if the hippocampus is only a temporary custodian, and the neocortex eventually becomes self-sufficient.
Huh. So the hippocampus basically works itself out of a job.
Eventually, yes. But, And this is where it got interesting for researchers. For a long time, nobody could actually explain structurally why one system learns fast and the other learns slow. Models just assumed it, hard-coded a faster learning rate into the hippocampus, and called it a day.
Which is basically cheating, right? You're not explaining the speed difference, you're just declaring it.
Exactly. So that's the actual gap in the science. What in the tissue itself makes one part fast and one part slow?
Okay, but here's what actually bugs me about the old models. It's not that they were wrong about the speeds. Hippocampus fast, neocortex slow, fine. It's how they built that into the math.
Go on.
So imagine you're coding a racing game, right? And you want the sports car to go faster than the minivan. There's two ways to do that. Option 1, you build a bigger virtual engine, more horsepower, actual mechanism.
And option 2?
Option 2, you just go into the menu and change the top speed stat from 90 to 200. Done. Car's fast now.
That's exactly what the old consolidation models did, actually.
Right? They just typed a bigger learning rate number into the hippocampus's code. Didn't explain why it learns fast, just declared it and moved on.
It's descriptive, not explanatory. You've matched the outcome without touching the actual biology underneath it.
Which, cool, I guess, if all you want is a car that goes fast in a menu. Not so useful if you're trying to understand engines.
So here's the thing. That's the actual gap a 2024 paper went after. Researchers built what's called a coupled neural field model, where instead of assigning arbitrary speeds, they modeled the hippocampus and neocortex as continuous tissues, different physical sizes, different wiring density, and just let the math run.
Wait, so no cheating? No typing in a number?
None. The question they actually asked was, what is the real structural reason one system learns fast and the other learns slow? Not, let's assume it, let's find it.
Okay, now that sounds like building the engine.
So here's the practical problem they ran into before they even got to write a single equation. Your brain has something like 86 billion neurons, and each one can have thousands of connections. If you tried to simulate every single neuron and every single synapse individually, you'd need a supercomputer the size of a warehouse, and it'd still take forever to run.
Right, because you're not just tracking 86 billion things. You're tracking how all of them talk to each other.
Exactly. The connections multiply the problem. They don't just add to it. So instead of modeling individual neurons, this paper uses something called a neural field, which basically means you stop treating brain tissue as billions of separate little switches and start treating it as one continuous surface.
Okay, a surface. Like
a pond. Think about watching ripples move across water. You don't need to calculate the path of every individual water molecule to describe the wave. You just need equations for how the surface as a whole rises and falls. The molecules are still doing their thing underneath. You're just not tracking each one.
So it's less, here's what every water molecule is doing, and more, here's the shape of the wave.
That's it. And that's exactly the move they make with brain tissue. Model the whole sheet, let the activity ripple across it as a continuous pattern, rather than bookkeeping neuron by neuron. So in the paper...
Wait, so they built two ponds, one for the hippocampus, one for the neocortex.
2 ponds, yes. Different sizes, different densities, wired up differently to each other. The Journal of Theoretical Biology paper actually treats both regions as continuous tissue fields with distinct structural properties and shows that a small, densely packed field can learn a pattern almost instantly and then slowly train a much larger, sparser field to hold onto it. No hard-coded speeds. The pond does that on its own, just from its shape.
Okay, but why does the small pond learn instantly and the big pond doesn't? What's actually driving that?
So here's the thing. In their equations, It's not some abstract rule. It's literally the physical distance between neurons. They call it distance-dependent synaptic plasticity, which just means how fast a connection can strengthen depends on how far apart the two neurons actually are.
Huh. Okay, so it's basically real estate.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, let me try this. Hippocampus is a tiny, tightly packed village. Everybody's already connected. You tell your neighbor something over the fence, and by lunchtime, the whole village knows.
That tracks with the model exactly. Short distance, existing wiring, near instant strengthening.
Right, so a new memory is just gossip in a village that already talks constantly. Cheap, fast, done by dinner.
Whereas the neocortex is that sprawling metropolis, and two neighborhoods across town don't have a road yet.
So you've got to build the actual infrastructure. Repeated trips, repeated calls, before that connection is real.
And this isn't just a convenient story they told to make the math work. There's real synapse-level biology behind it. A Nature Communication study looking at actual dendrites, those branch-like arms a neuron uses to receive signals, found a gradient. The branches farthest from the cell body are actually more cooperative, needing less input to lock in a lasting change than the ones close in.
Wait, so distance doesn't just slow things down everywhere. It changes the rules of the game depending on where you are?
Exactly. Distance isn't a metaphor for difficulty here. In the tissue, it's genuinely doing the work.
Huh. So the village isn't like fast learning. The village basically is fast learning.
Here's a wrinkle I haven't mentioned yet. The model doesn't treat the hippocampus as one tissue. It's 3 fields talking to each other, not 2. Neocortex of the top, and hippocampus itself splits into the dentate gyrus and what's called the CA regions. The whole route even has a name, the trisynaptic pathway, which just means a signal crosses 3 separate junctions on its way through. 3 handoffs, 3 chances for it to either survive or die out completely.
So it's not really the hippocampus. It's a hippocampus with an assembly line running inside it.
That's a good way to put it. And the dentate gyrus, which
you already covered, back when you almost fell down the subfield rabbit hole and stopped yourself.
caught. Fine. So the piece that matters here is the CA region. Think of it as the actual processing floor inside that dense little village. Tightly wired, already built, and it's specifically where a memory pattern gets reassembled once it's handed off.
Dentate gyrus is reception. CA is the back office where the work happens.
Close enough. And here's why the detour has to exist at all. Say you met someone yesterday. That memory does exist in your neocortex, but it's brand new, which means the connections are still weak. If the neocortex tries to complete it on its own, fire the whole pattern off one partial cue, the signal just doesn't have the strength to cross that distance. It fizzles.
The roads aren't built yet.
Right. So instead of dying, it detours, down through dentate gyrus, into CA, where those exact connections were already built yesterday, at hippocampal speed. CA finishes the pattern and fires the whole thing back up to the neocortex.
Wait, so when I remember something from yesterday, effortlessly, that's not actually my neocortex doing it?
Not yet, no. It feels effortless because the hippocampus is quietly doing the heavy lifting underneath, bridging a gap the neocortex hasn't finished paving. And this isn't just a tidy story built for the math. There's a well-known model published in PNAS that simulated exactly this traffic, hippocampus and cortex talking back and forth. And it showed the hippocampus reactivating on its own during offline periods, essentially training that slower cortical network in the background with nobody directing it.
Huh. So every time I nail a fact from last week, I'm basically watching a rerun the hippocampus is quietly airing for me.
That's exactly it. And that rerun only has to play so many times before the neocortex stops needing the hippocampus's help at all.
Okay, so bump attractor. I read that phrase and pictured like a video game boss. But it's actually simpler than that. It's just a little patch of neurons that stays lit up, holding its position, instead of flickering and fading. Think of a spotlight on a dark stage that doesn't wander. It just sits on one spot. That's a bump. And a full memory isn't one spotlight. It's a handful of them on different stages, all landing on their mark at the same moment.
Close, though it's less separate spotlights and more that they're wired to trigger each other. One field's bump switches another field's bump on. That coordination is the whole memory pattern.
Right, okay. So picture this. You're in a coffee shop, and you catch a whiff of perfume from someone you talked to for 2 minutes yesterday. Your brain goes, wait, I know that smell. That's the retrieval cue. It lights up one bump, way out in the neocortex, tied to just the scent. But the link between that scent and their actual face is 1 day old. It's basically wet cement.
Barely set, yeah.
So the neocortex tries to fire the rest of the pattern, pull the face up, and it just doesn't make it. The signal goes out and dies somewhere in the sprawl, because the roads out there genuinely aren't built yet.
Exactly. It dissipates. Not enough shared wiring to carry it that far.
So it detours, down through the dentate gyrus, into CA, where, because that connection got built yesterday, at hippocampal speed, it's already solid. CA finishes the picture, face and all, and fires the whole thing back up. And that's the part that gets me. I just experienced that as remembering. There's no felt seam where the detour happened.
There isn't, no. The seam only shows up in the model, not in you.
Which is kind of wild, honestly. The whole architecture is basically engineered to feel effortless while doing something that complicated underneath. Okay, but that whole detour system only works if the neocortex eventually learns it on its own, right? It can't lean on the hippocampus forever.
Right, it has to graduate, and that's where sleep comes in. Specifically something called slow wave sleep, the deep, dreamless stage early in the night. During that stage, the CA region, the hippocampus's fast processing hub we talked about, gets hit with this broad, uniform electrical wash. Not a targeted signal, just a general current sweeping across the whole tissue, like turning on a floodlight over an entire field instead of aiming a spotlight.
Huh. So why doesn't that just light up every memory you've ever had at once?
Because electricity, like most things in nature, takes the path of least resistance. Think of a lightning strike. It doesn't fry the whole neighborhood evenly. It finds the one grounded metal rod and goes there. The bump attractors from that day, the ones we said are still wet cement, have the freshest, strongest connections in the whole hippocampus. So when that uniform wash hits, it's those specific patterns that reactivate, preferentially. Everything older and weaker just doesn't catch.
So the wash is dumb, but the routing isn't.
Exactly right. And here's the part that actually does the construction work. Once a pattern lights up in CA, it fires the completed memory back up to the neocortex. And this isn't a one-time broadcast. It happens again and again, tens to hundreds of times over the course of a single night's sleep, according to sleep researchers. Researchers who study hippocampal cortical replay describe it almost as a dialogue, the fast system feeding training data over and over to the slow one. And that repetition is what forces distant cortical neurons, ones that have never really talked before, to keep firing together.
Wait, hundreds? In one night?
Hundreds, yeah. And every single one of those replays is a tiny bit of physical construction. Strengthening a synapse here, a fraction more there. It's not a metaphor for learning. It is the learning. The wiring is being built, literally, cell by cell, while you're unconscious.
So my hippocampus is just running the same rerun from my cortex hundreds of times until it finally sinks in. Okay, hold on though. I have to push back on this. You've got a signal traveling through 3 overlap stations, down into the hippocampus, and back up hundreds of times a night, just so I can remember a face. Why wouldn't evolution just give the neocortex a faster learning rate and skip the whole relay?
Because a fast neocortex would be a disaster. That's not me being dramatic, that's the actual math.
A disaster. Okay, sell me on that.
So the neocortex isn't just storing your Tuesday, it's storing everything. Your sense of who you are, decades of accumulated knowledge, the whole framework you use to understand the world. If it learned as fast as the hippocampus, every new experience would instantly rewrite its synaptic weights to make room. There's a name for what happens when a network does that: catastrophic interference, which just means new learning doesn't add to old learning, it overwrites it, wipes it. Not gently either.
Wait, so it's not that it would forget the new thing, it's that learning the new thing would break the old thing.
Exactly that. You'd perfectly encode the sandwich you had for lunch today. And in the process of writing that in, you might accidentally scramble the memory of how to ride a bike. Or your childhood best friend's face. The system can't tell the difference between important and just happened if it learns instantly. It just overwrites whatever's already sitting there. There's a modeling paper in PNAS that actually built this out directly. They found that keeping the hippocampus fast and the cortex slow, with that back and forth replay, is specifically what lets the cortex absorb new memories without the old ones getting corrupted.
Huh. So the slowness isn't a bug. It's basically a firewall.
A very apt word for it, yes. The whole elaborate detour. Hippocampus catches it fast, cortex learns it slow, hundreds of quiet nightly replays. That's not inefficiency. That's the guardrail keeping your entire identity from getting rewritten by lunch.
Okay, that's actually a genuinely terrifying alternate universe you just described.
So here's a practical problem hiding underneath all this elegant relay work. The hippocampus cannot just keep filling up forever. It's small, remember, the village, not the metropolis. If it held on to everything permanently, it would run out of room within days.
Right. So something has to clear out. Where does that actually happen?
Back in the dentate gyrus, that entry hall in the pathway we talked about. And here's the thing, it's not a fixed structure. It never stops building. Throughout your entire adult life, that region keeps producing brand new neurons. It's called adult neurogenesis. And the newborn cells have a strange quirk. For the first few weeks, their internal wiring is still immature. They're unusually excitable and more easily activated than fully grown neurons, so they respond more readily to incoming signals.
Chaotically, how chaotic are we talking?
Unpredictable, high frequency, no sense of when to stop.
Okay, I need an image for this, because unstable chemistry firing chaotically just doesn't stick. And apparently my brain has opinions about what sticks without asking me. So picture the existing neurons in there, the ones holding your recent memories, as a small office. Fully staffed, everyone's got a routine. Nobody's raising their voice. Now adult neurogenesis kicks in, and it's like someone opens the door and wheels in a stroller full of screaming toddlers and just leaves them in the middle of the office. No orientation, no headphones, pure chaos, right in the middle of a quiet workday.
Yes, that is unsettlingly close to what the research actually shows. There's a paper in neuroplasticity that found neurogenesis plays both roles at once. It helps you encode brand new, fine-grained memories, and at the same time, it actively weakens the older ones already sitting in that same office.
So the toddlers are doing their job and wrecking the filing cabinet simultaneously.
Precisely. Which raises the obvious question, what do the actual office workers do about it? So here's the thing. The mature neurons can't exactly file a complaint. What they do instead is rely on a homeostatic mechanism researchers call synaptic scaling. In plain terms, the cell adjusts the strength of its own synapses to keep its firing rate steady, turning down its own volume knob when things get too noisy.
Okay, volume knob. I like that. But how? Mechanically?
Right, so this is the part that's actually kind of beautiful. The neuron doesn't rewire its connections. Instead, it adjusts the number of receptors sitting at its synapses, the docking sites that receive chemical signals from other neurons. By tuning how many of these receptors are available, the whole cell can turn its overall responsiveness up or down to keep its firing rate steady. Actually, the specific channel subtypes don't matter for what you need to know. What matters is the net effect. Fewer of the gates that let the cell fire easily, more of the gates that keep it quiet. The neuron is literally rebuilding its own skin to be less twitchy.
Ellen, you almost gave me an ion channel seminar.
I caught myself. Barely.
Okay, so less twitchy. What does that actually cost it?
Everything it was already storing. Because that same circuit is the one holding on to yesterday's memory bump, the tiny, stable pattern from the coffee shop, say. Once new neurons wire themselves into that circuit to handle the toddler noise, the old connections get reshuffled, and the brain has a much harder time reactivating that original pattern. The memory isn't gone, it's just gotten harder to reach.
So the memory's still in there?
In there, yes, but it's behind the wall, the old key doesn't open anymore. Your normal retrieval cue, the perfume, say, was calibrated for the old, lower threshold. It arrives at the new, much higher one, and it's just too weak. It dissipates before it can trigger anything.
Huh. So forgetting isn't the memory leaving, it's the door getting heavier.
That's exactly it. And it's not just a nice metaphor. There's real cellular evidence behind it, published in Trends in Neurosciences. The newborn cells physically wire themselves into the existing circuit, forming brand new connections in both directions. And that rewiring shifts the whole local balance of excitation and inhibition the network needs to do what's called pattern completion, reassembling the full memory from a partial cue. Disturb that balance enough, and the odds of ever fully reinstating the old pattern just drop.
Okay, so it's not erased, it's evicted.
Evicted is good. The furniture's all still there. Nobody can get back into the apartment.
This is where I stopped just believing the model and started actually believing it. Because somebody tested it. On mice. Directly.
Directly.
So there's this experiment. You take an adult mouse, it learns something scary, a fear memory, classic conditioning, the kind where a sound predicts a shock. Days later, once that memory should be locked in solid, you give the mouse a running wheel. And exercise happens to be one of the easiest known ways to crank up neurogenesis. More new neurons showing up in the dentate gyrus than usual. The mice that ran forgot the fear. Faster. Measurably faster than the mice that just sat there.
Noticeably faster. This is published research in the journal Science. Increase the neurogenesis after the memory's already formed, and you speed up the forgetting. Not correlate with it, cause it.
Wait, after? So the memory's already sitting there, already stored, and then you flood the new neurons in and it just goes.
It goes. And here's the part that convinced me it's not a fluke. They ran it in reverse, too. Suppress neurogenesis after learning, fewer new neurons, and the memory sticks around way longer than it normally would.
Okay, so it's a dial. Turn it up, forget faster. Turn it down, remember longer.
A dial, yes. And they didn't stop at adult mice. They tested infants too, which is where it gets wild. Because infant mammals, us included, are famous for infantile amnesia. That thing where you genuinely cannot remember being a baby, no matter how hard you try.
Right, which everyone just assumes is because babies' brains are too undercooked to form real memories in the first place.
That's the assumption. But when they damped down neurogenesis in infant mice right after learning, those early memories didn't fade the way they normally do, which means the memory was there all along. The forgetting was the active part.
So it's not that babies can't form memories. It's that they're forming them and then getting bulldozed.
And the cleanest piece of evidence for that? They took species that are naturally born with low postnatal neurogenesis, ones that don't normally show infantile amnesia the same way, and artificially cranked their neurogenesis up.
And they started forgetting like babies do.
Exactly like babies do. Suddenly, those animals started losing their early memories too, right on schedule.
So you can basically manufacture infantile amnesia on demand just by adjusting how many new brain cells are showing up.
On demand. Which is exactly why this stopped being, well, it's correlated, and became, the new neurons are doing this, causally.
That's the actual headline, isn't it? New brain cells erase old memories. Not a metaphor. Measured in a lab on command.
On command. Here's what I keep coming back to, though. At some point in this whole story, the question stops being, how does erasure work? And becomes, why would a brain ever be built to erase itself on purpose?
Right. Feels backwards.
It feels backwards until you remember the timing. By the time neurogenesis is quietly locking away a hippocampal memory, the neocortex has usually already finished building its own independent copy through all those nights of replay. So the hippocampal version isn't the only copy anymore. It's just the scratch copy that's outlived its usefulness. Clearing it doesn't cost you the memory. It frees up a small, dense, expensive piece of tissue that was about to run out of room. There's actually a paper in Trends in Neurosciences that frames it exactly that way. That this kind of neurogenesis-driven forgetting is adaptive precisely because it limits how long the hippocampus holds on to things, cuts down interference between old and new experiences, and pushes storage toward the neocortex, where it's supposed to end up long-term.
So it's not sloppy housekeeping. It's scheduled demolition.
That's not a bad way to put it. And the same cells are doing double duty here, which is the part I find genuinely elegant. Research in neuroplasticity shows those new neurons are simultaneously helping you encode fine, detailed new memories, and, through the very same circuit remodeling, destabilizing the older ones. It's not two separate systems. It's one population of cells built to both learn and unlearn at the same time, as a package deal.
Huh. Okay. That actually changes something for me.
Go on.
Every time I forget where I put my keys, I filed that under my brain is broken. But it's not broken. It's just paying rent. That's the price of still being able to learn tomorrow. Okay, hold on though. This is all mouse data so far, right? Running wheels, fear conditioning, infant mice forgetting less. At some point I have to ask the obvious question. Does the adult human hippocampus even still make new neurons? Because if it doesn't, this whole screaming toddler story might just not be our story.
That is genuinely the right question. And I wish I could just hand you a clean yes or no. There are two major post-mortem studies, real human hippocampal tissue, both from serious labs, and they land in almost opposite places.
Opposite how?
So one, published in Cell Stem Cell, looked at hippocampal tissue from people aged 14 all the way up to 79. And they found thousands of immature, newborn-looking neurons in the dentate gyrus at every age they checked. The volume of that region barely changed across the whole lifespan. Their read was, adult neurogenesis is real, and it just keeps going.
Okay, so good news for the toddler theory.
That's what I'd have said too. But then there's a paper in Nature that did something similar and got the opposite picture entirely. They tracked the same kind of markers and found a sharp drop within the first year of life, only rare young neurons left by adolescence. And in their adult samples,
Wait, none? Like, literally zero?
under their specific staining and sampling method, yes, no young neurons detected at all. Same basic question, same organ, wildly different answer.
So, which one's wrong?
Maybe neither is the uncomfortable answer. There's a review in Frontiers in Neuroscience that basically audited both camps, and a lot of it comes down to how the tissue was handled, how fast it was preserved after death, how long it sat, which molecular markers you're even staining for. Human brain tissue degrades fast, and no signal can mean not there, or it can mean we lost it before we could look.
Huh. So the toddlers are definitely real when we're kids. We just genuinely don't know if the nursery ever closes.
Exactly that. Something is clearly happening early in life. Both sides agree there. Whether it meaningfully continues into your and my adult hippocampus, that part is still an open, actively fought-over question. And I'd rather tell you that honestly than pretend the mouse story just transfers over untouched.
Here's what I keep coming back to, though. Whether or not the toddlers ever actually leave the nursery in an adult brain, the bigger idea survives that whole debate, right? Forgetting isn't your brain glitching. It's doing something. On purpose. Every single night.
That's exactly the part that survives the uncertainty, yes.
So sleep isn't really putting the phone down so the battery charges. It's more like the phone's running a background update while you're not looking. Actually rewiring things, laying the roads we talked about.
Construction, not charging. I like that better than most descriptions I've heard, honestly.
I'll take the compliment. But that actually changes how I feel about forgetting my coworker's name, or losing the plot of a book I read 2 months ago. That's not a personal failing. That's the system doing its job.
Correctly. Which is a strange thing to have to say about losing information, but yes.
Right? If you never forgot anything, you'd never learn anything new either. There'd be no vacancy in the village.
Exactly. The forgetting is the price of the vacancy.
Huh. Price of the vacancy. That's a good one. So the frustration itself, the, why can't I remember that feeling, is almost evidence you're not broken.
Evidence the system's alive. That's a much kinder way to walk around all day.
Okay, so if I'm handing this to someone at a bar in 3 sentences. First, forgetting isn't your brain glitching. It's mostly on purpose. New neurons show up in the hippocampus. The older cells have to raise their own threshold just to cope with the noise. And an old memory pattern can end up unreachable. Not deleted, just behind more resistance than a normal cue can push through. Second, and this is the one that actually changed how I think about sleep, none of that long-term memory happens by accident overnight. Your hippocampus is replaying the day's information over and over while you're out cold, training your neocortex, cell by cell. Sleep isn't your brain clocking out. It's the night shift actually building the thing.
And worth saying, that's not a metaphor. That's physically happening hundreds of times every single night.
Right. And look, we still don't fully know if adult humans keep making new hippocampal neurons the way mice do. Real disagreement in the field. No clean answer yet. But the bigger lesson doesn't need that resolved. Your brain makes room for new stuff by letting some old stuff go. That's not a bug report. That's the design.
Which is, honestly, the whole idea in one sentence. A brain that remembered everything forever would be a brain that couldn't learn anything new tomorrow.
Exactly. And that's kind of the whole bet behind Narako, actually. If memory really works this way, quick hippocampal grab, slow overnight cortical training, then some healthy clearing out, you don't fight that. You build around it. Spaced retrieval instead of cramming. real challenge instead of easy repeats, scheduling that actually respects when you sleep. Work with the rhythm your brain already runs on, not against it. That's it for this one. Go build something your neocortex will actually want to keep. Well, that wraps up our episode. If you're still listening, I wanted to thank you for sticking with us through this journey. And we hope you learned something new, as that is our goal with the Narako project, to teach people new things and help them remember them. We hope to see you next week again, where we will continue to tackle and dive into even more interesting topics. Have a nice rest of your